You're listening to Wild Culture, a podcast discussing consumer culture and the powerful influence of business strategy. Today we're talking discontinued products and how to discontinue a product without upsetting your customers, and just digging into, all of the what, why, when, how did that happen? What's the point of discontinuing a product, and can you do it successfully? So I want to talk about just defining the parameters of what this is exactly. So if we come at this from the consumer angle, you buy a product. It very quickly becomes your favorite. It might be a perfume, a cosmetic, a skincare product, a pair of jeans, specific kitchen appliances, dishwashers, that kind of things. Then the consumer wants to buy another one, but they discover that it has been discontinued and they're devastated. Okay, maybe devastated is a bit of a stretch, but when a product is axed from the shelves, it puts consumers in an uncomfortable, unfamiliar zone of having to figure out what a suitable replacement product might be. From a strategic standpoint, there's always a catalyst behind these business decisions. It might be the cost of the goods. Maybe they increased, or they somewhere in the supply chain, or maybe it might be the cost of goods specifically. So you might be trying to optimize them and reduce the cost, or something happened in the supply chain that caused the cost to go up, and it can be anything in the supply chain can cause this. It could be the need to reposition the brand so that it remains relevant and modern in market, or the big one, which is where product development significantly changes the product or just makes it entirely redundant. I want to linger in product development and really dig into what it is for a minute, just to take the mystery right out of it. Product development has a few angles. These are the things that cause it to be necessary, which is either going to be to innovate a new product entirely, or to improve some element of an existing product and repackage it as though it's brand new. And in a sense, an improvement is a new product, but it has piggybacked off its predecessor, and it wouldn't exist without it. So there is a huge difference between an improvement and an innovation. Innovating a new product is inherently very difficult, because innovation is the exact moment that a thing crosses over into the market and is made available for consumers on the shelves for the very first time. Innovations are inventions, but an innovation is definitely not the same as an improvement. With improvements, you might see micro innovations, but the cognitive process that is required to build an improvement is largely analytical and convergent thinking. Whereas with innovations and inventions, divergent, highly creative thinking is mandatory, which is important information, because the corporate atmosphere, the brand as it exists, is one that allows innovation through the door. It's one where there is cultural readiness surrounding it that embraces innovation, which means that the brand and the product are going to be known by the consumer for being innovative. So to summarize that slightly differently, the organizational culture around the brand has to be wired for sound for innovation to occur. And it's arguably more difficult for leadership to be able to tolerate the creativity that's needed with innovation than it is for them to manage iterations of improvement, which are straightforward and much easier to explain, to your CEO or the board or investors and to an extent consumers. So there really is a difference in what the consumer is expecting from an innovation. So that's product development. From the consumer perspective, however, they're not really thinking about the business reason. Whatever that business reason is, when a brand doesn't make it easy for them to find a replacement for a product that's been discontinued, it's a great way to lose them. It's a great way to ensure that your customer becomes someone else's loyal customer. So along with the decision to axe a product comes a massive amount of risk. When a brand intentionally kills a successful product, which a really great example of this is Apple, who removed the headphone jack, you might remember that, or changing the cables that were supplied in their product boxes. They are typically looking at it from the perspective of, well, who are we today? Who are we selling to today? What's important to that customer base? And are we evolving alongside them at a pace that they find acceptable? So where Apple approached their cables from a sustainability and a consumer need perspective, the consumers were expecting that to an extent. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. They were expecting an innovative company to do something differently, to live that brand philosophy of think differently. There are other brands that deliberately destroy products to maintain exclusivity. So it's a discontinuation of the product because they don't want anyone else to have it. That can play out very differently if the target consumer thinks that the brand's behavior is extreme or if it fundamentally clashes with their personal values. And I'd say these days, not too many consumers find setting fire to a stash of unsold handbags or t-shirts acceptable. Dropping a price tag that is discounted or clearance on a product is probably going to be a much less risky move in most people's eyes. But a brand and a consumer can have totally different perspectives on what the right move is going to be. For a consumer, that perspective comes from a place of pain. If you've listened to my previous episodes, you'll know that I have spoken about loss aversion, which comes from the field of behavioral economics. Loss aversion causes consumers very real, actual mental and sometimes even physical discomfort when they feel they are losing something. When they have an old, faithful product that they've relied on for years, disrupting it upsets the usual flow of their daily life. And I'm sure you've experienced this. You're in a shop, you need to replace your dependable thing, and it's gone. This actually happened to me just recently with my makeup, my foundation. I'd been using a product for a couple of years and it was discontinued. But what really ticked me off was that the brand didn't discontinue the whole product line, just some of the shades, which of course just happened to include the exact shade that I use. So suddenly I found myself in a flurry of, oh, well, what the hell am I going to use now? And I'm discovering this right there in the store. So what I thought was going to be a quick run in and out shopping trip turns into me having to conduct product research on the spot and looking at the backs of labels and a 3-second thing turned into, 10 minutes of me staring at a shelf, which just chewed up my time. That's what product discontinuations do to the consumer. It forces the consumer to start over. And most of the time there is absolutely no heads up about the change. There's no email, there's no campaign, because the brand assumes that a low volume in product sales means the product lacks worth. So those outlier customers like me, whose Old Faithful was discontinued, get completely alienated by the brand. It sends a subconscious message to the consumer of, well, we don't care about you. You don't fit in here. Or you don't make us enough money to warrant offering you a product or a service. That sentiment can be enough to make a consumer walk away from the brand. So it can damage brand loyalty. Some consumers get their backs up about this and they will start online petitions. Now, I've seen a couple of these on Facebook over the years for discontinued chocolates and ice creams. And how a consumer often finds out that a product is dying off is when there's a clearance tag put on the price, or when the product becomes harder to find because its stockists are reduced. That can lead to hoarding, which pushes the consumer straight into scarcity mindset. Once that happens, what brands see when they look at their sales data is this little spike in inventory turnover. Now, I've seen that spike interpreted in a couple of ways. I've seen brands blame the supplier for the hoarding, and I've seen brands dismiss it as a natural reaction to the cheaper clearance price point. But what it is really signaling is just how important that product was to the consumer. And it might be that the stockist recognized what the brand didn't, and that's why they hoarded it. Brands know that products become extensions of the consumer's identity. They are literally the things that people live their lives in. They help them to live the life of their choosing. And that is the ultimate luxury that a person gets to have, is that choice. Now, I'm sure if every consumer had unlimited money, they'd all buy the most luxurious premium brands, the absolute best. But choice is often about buying the best that you can afford. The consumer is doing the best that they can. And what they chose was your product. You know, what an absolute honor that they would be willing to spend their hard-earned money with you because they deemed your product the best possible option for them in that moment. So there is a deep-seated empathy that is lost by brands that discontinue things without notice, without explanation, and without a clear alternative. But, you know, the astonishing thing here is that other consumers have that empathy for each other. What we see in market research is pockets of consumers who will come together and they will form vibrant subcultures around, you know, the dead product. We see people on Reddit and TikTok who will trade their extras. They will sell their expired stock for way more than its recommended retail price. Or just, you know, they will talk. They will engage in pure nostalgia and love for that item. That is the legacy that is left by brands when they kill off a hero product. So to bring this back to the product development strategies I mentioned earlier, when there is a genuine need to innovate a product, maybe there's a new ingredient that's going to be way more beneficial for the user, how can a brand approach that discontinuation when they know it's going to hurt? Because it's always going to hurt. It's just a question of how much. What is the best strategy to break the news? How do you successfully upgrade a product without obliterating consumer trust, alienating them, or pissing them off? So I have 3 golden rules for this. Firstly, make it obvious. Not every consumer follows you on social media or reads your newsletter. Never get arrogant and assume that they do. For many consumers, your relationship is purely transactional. If your product sits on a shelf, and it doesn't matter if it's a physical or a digital shelf, make the transition obvious. A new and improved sticker is a classic, clear way to let them know that there's a shift happening. Secondly, make it transparent. Use messaging like, we heard you say this, we know it doesn't work, we've listened, and we made the product better. But you can make that transparency fun too. Celebrate the old product. Highlight how successful it was, how many people liked it, how many people it helped, while at the same time introducing the new one. And thirdly, let it take time. As I said, your consumers aren't watching your every move. They are busy people. It can take seeing the same message in multiple different ways across multiple different channels for the news to finally land, because their minds have to be in the specific mode of looking at your brand to take it in. Routine repetition equals reward is the best approach here. So those are my 3 hot tips for discontinuing a product. I hope that gives you some food for thought and helps you understand why that might happen, what that looks like, and how to do it well. So I'll leave you with a little bit of homework here. Next time you're looking at your product lineup, really sit inside of the question, how would it make my customer feel if this disappeared tomorrow? And force yourself to explore that from both a positive and negative perspective without being dismissive or defensive, because this will come up at some point for every brand. This comes up, and you need to be able to think through thoroughly, will we discontinue this product? So that's it for today. Until next time. Thanks for listening in to Wild Culture. If you found value in our conversation today, please make sure you follow or subscribe to the show wherever you listen. Taking a moment to leave us a quick rating or review is the best way you can help other curious strategists and passionate spenders find us as well. Bye for now.